Our sermon text this morning is from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 13, verses 24 through 30 and 36 through 43. For those of you that are reading along in the Pew Bibles, that starts on page 14 in the New Testament. Listen now for the word of the Lord. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weed among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where, then, did these weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." The slaves said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell the reapers, 'Collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn.'" Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples approached him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field." He answered, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burnt up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears to hear listen." When was the last time that you shook your head and wondered, how in the world could someone do such a thing? This past week, I was reading an article somewhere about the ongoing Israeli shelling of some of the Palestinian settlements. Most of you probably know they're trying to combat Hamas, the rather extreme group of Muslims that are fighting with Israel. I'm as big of a believer as anyone else in Israel's right to defend itself against terrorists. But the fact that, according to this article, civilians were setting up beach chairs to watch the bombardments struck me as a little bit disturbing. It's kind of disturbing anytime that people want to watch ongoing warfare as though it were 4th of July fireworks, especially when there's such a high risk of civilian casualties. But we don't really have to look so far away for chances to wonder why people do the things they do. Everyone has known a parent or spouse who's abused loved ones, or a boss who's mistreated employees, or maybe it's a teacher or a politician or even a member of the clergy who's misused their position and abused someone's trust. It's hard enough to accept evil in the world when it's confined to other people that we're comfortable thinking of as the enemy, and there are a lot of those. But it's even harder to accept evil when we see it in those who we think ought to know better, or those who we trust. It makes us, it makes us wonder how, if there really is a God, he could possibly tolerate such things. A former coworker of mine from several years ago, before I attended seminary, sort of half-jokingly, as we were talking about the ongoing warfare in the Middle East, said, "Kill them all and let God sort them out." He had that kind of aggressive mindset. He made jokes like that a lot. And it's tempting sometimes. It would be much simpler. But we all know it's really an unreasonable solution. We're called as Christians to be merciful and to exercise some degree of judgment. Still, today's passage tells us that for the time being, we live in a world where good and evil exist side by side. And we're called to accept that situation to some extent because there are no easy answers as to what we can possibly do about the situation. And so Jesus forces us to rethink the way that we see people. Our sort of us versus them mentality that we so often live with has to be challenged. The parable has both the Son of Man and the evil one planting seeds throughout the world. And there are many different ways that we can see this. The most obvious one, and I think the one that we're most comfortable with, is for us to see ourselves, us, in the church, and other people that are like us, or maybe all of America, as the good seed, which the Son of Man planted, that's going to shine like the sun in heaven someday. And this version of the story sets up them, our enemies, maybe people outside the church, or the people that are different from us, as the ones that were planted by the evil one. They're the ones that are going to be thrown in the fire someday, and it's a good thing we're not like them. But it's not necessarily so clear-cut. Or maybe Jesus could, in fact, just say, let's throw them in the fire now. The Bible tells us that we're all made in God's image. We all start out good, and there's, at least I believe, the potential for any and all of us to be good. According to Matthew chapter 5, verse 45, God causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's not always up to us to make that distinction of who's the good seed and who's the bad seed. In fact, in Luke chapter 13, verse 4, Jesus asks, when he's confronted about a tower that collapsed and killed a bunch of people, he says, "Those 18 who died when the tower in Siloam fell on them, do you think they were more guilty than all the others living in Jerusalem?" We're cautioned against assuming that we're the good ones and the bad ones are someone else who's definitely not us. And so there's another reading of this passage that suggests itself. The good seed and the bad seed aren't always two distinct groups of people. The good and the bad seeds all fall within the same person. Distinctions between good and evil aren't always between one person and another, because that line between good and evil runs through each and every single one of us. It's true that we're asked to choose our way to an extent. And as we go through life, we are constantly leaning more towards good or evil. There can be a point where we go so far into evil that within this life, maybe there's no redemption for us anymore. But nevertheless, the good and the evil are allowed to grow together within each person. And so what about the throwing of the weeds into the fire? That's given the eschatological bent of the church these days. We're hearing a lot about that, about God coming, about Jesus returning, and what's going to happen to those who haven't accepted him. And that throwing of the weeds into the fire may refer to the burning of those who do evil or don't follow God. But also notice that Jesus refers to the burning of all causes of sin. I think that before any of us can shine like the sun in heaven, all that sinfulness in each of us has to be burned away. And so we're asked to not only make distinctions between who is good and who is evil, but between what parts of ourselves are good or evil. What causes each of us to sin that we might need to begin to let go of in this life before it's burned away in the next? Sometimes it's hatred of other people, envy, jealousy, all the anxieties that we have that cause us to not focus on God, all those things in life that we value more than we value God, that might make us turn away from him. Jesus challenges us to live among those we consider different or undesirable, and to continue worshiping God in the hopes that we might be a light to those around us that don't know God's love yet. Maybe a few of those weeds might yet turn into grain. But we aren't asked to accept evil. We should acknowledge its presence and not necessarily expect to stamp it out entirely, but we should recognize it and work against it. I think Jesus asks us to start by praying for discernment, for the ability to tell good from evil, and for the strength to do good, even when evil seems so much stronger. We're also asked to see and recognize the evil in ourselves and in those around us, and to seek to correct it. Not necessarily to judge those who we see doing evil, but to point evil out where it exists and to seek to replace it with good. People like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. saw unjust societies, and they reacted not with hatred of those that did wrong, but with love that sought to redeem all of society's brokenness. And above and beyond all else, we're asked to love others. Jesus, it occurred to me, died on the cross asking for forgiveness for those who crucified him. Not making excuses for what they did, or trying to explain what they did to make it not seem so bad, but asking for forgiveness. I think that's what we Christians are called to do. Seek to encourage the good in ourselves and in others, and pray for the ability to forgive those who do wrong, in the hopes that the evil might start to be burned away now, and that we might begin to shine even in this life as a light that others around us can see, so that they may all be pointed towards God. Amen.